It's very important that you create an informed consent when conducting research, so that the participants know exactly what they are doing, so they are not surprised when they arrive. Although in scenario 1 they did have written generic consent forms, they were not truly informed consent. This is because it did not inform them exactly what they would do. This meant that they did not know what they would need to be in swimwear, and so some were reluctant to do this. In order for consent to be considered informed, participants need to voluntarily agree to the experiment, with an exact understanding of what the experiment will be and what they have to do. For example, in this scenario, the researcher needed to make it clear to the participants, prior to them agreeing to take part, that they would need to be in swimwear around others. The informed consent should describe all the specific details of the study, including the purpose of the study, the procedures in the study, the duration of the study, the potential risks and benefits of participation, and should also inform the participant of their rights to withdraw. Although the researcher did have a consent form, it didn't fully explain the experiment. This is known as passive deception, which is where the researcher accidentally hides small bits of information from the participants. This may make the participants reluctant to do the experiment, and so it's important that you include all information so that your participants know what they're doing and they're happy to do this. Doing this ensures all participants know what they're doing and are happy to do this, so it can improve the reliability of the research, as participants are not uncomfortable. Here, the researcher has disregarded the fact that it is a sensitive topic and that they are working with a vulnerable group of people and should be taking extra precautions. The image shown shows an example of an informed consent form for a study. Next, you must include a risk assessment. The researcher from scenario 2 should have included this in their study. A risk assessment is a method used to identify possible risks or hazards and analyse their severity. The image below shows a risk assessment completed by a researcher at Brighton University Laboratory for a Baswick school trip. According to HSE, a risk assessment should be recorded in writing and include the hazards, how these hazards cause harm, and the controls in place to minimise these risks. For example, in the risk assessment they have identified the risks of their experiment, as well as saying who would be effective and how probable and severe the hazard may be. The severity is measured by a number rating from 1 to 3. Hazards with a low probability are rated 1 and high probability are rated 3. The same goes for the severity of the injury. This is shown in the example risk assessment I made for this scenario. For example, in this experiment, one hazard is that the maximal exercise causes exertion. This can lead to the participant getting injured because you are more prone to injury when exhausted. It is very likely that the participant will become exerted in this experiment because it is a maximal test. So this has a probability rating of 3. However, becoming injured due to the exhaustion is much less likely, so it's only rated at 1. Therefore, the overall outcome is of 3. This is because you times the probability and the severity together. Therefore, controls may still be needed to minimise the effects of the hazard, because the probability is so high. If the researcher had completed a thorough risk assessment before conducting their experiment, they would have known the controls to put in place and how to prevent this from happening. They should have had a first aid kit or someone who is first aid trained to help participants if they got hurt. They could have also had an assistant help participants off the machines as another control. This did not happen as they did not create a risk assessment and so did not know the potential hazards and how to prevent them. In the third scenario, the researcher ensures all participants complete a medical screening form prior to the experiment. This involves participants filling out a form with their medical history and any conditions they suffer to help highlight potential problems, so that they know if you can or can't do something. For example, if one of the gymnasts in the experiment was asthmatic, The experiment involves a shuttle run test until fatigued. A medical screening form will ensure that the researcher is aware of their condition, and so can decide if the participant should take part in this test. And if they do, they can ensure they have the correct controls in place, like having an asthma pump ready. This is important because the participant may not be aware that taking part in the experiment may bring a big risk for them and cause massive harm to their health. As a result, the researcher would be unaware and the participant is at risk. By doing a medical screening and highlighting that it is important for them to know any medical conditions the participant has, they are making the experiment much safer for everyone